Good morning. On behalf of the Philip Rosenau Company, welcome to another Rosenau Cleaning University or RCU on the Go presentation. Today's topic is the dreaded M word. Our plan is to take the next 15 minutes to share some basic information on mold and how it should be handled. Given the brevity of today's session, we may not have time to answer everyone's questions, but we will be sending out a follow-up email to address all of those questions, as well as provide some additional resources should you want to do some more research. So please, as your questions come up, go ahead and enter them into the chat box on your screen, and we will address them as we can. So my name is Bill McGarvey. I'm the Director of Training and Sustainability here at the Philip Rosenau Company. Joining me today is John Thomas, our Director of Health and Wellness, as well as our villain, and if I do nothing else in the next 15 minutes, hopefully I pronounce this correctly, Aspergillus niger.
Yes, good morning.
So,
I'm John Thomas, not Aspergillus niger.
And he did give me a thumbs up, I did pronounce it correctly. So let's get on with our agenda for today. So we're going to start out with a little bit of background on mold, a little background information. Then we'll talk about how best to control and preferably prevent a mold outbreak. We'll talk about who can be involved in this, what should be done, and how to go about it. That's our plan for today. So at this point, I'll turn it over to John to talk a little bit about the background of mold.
Thank you, Bill. We do want to do a quick review so that we all know what we're really talking about here. So we're going to go back to our high school biology classes, and we're going to remember that mold is a member of the kingdom of fungi. The first question I always get is it fungi or fungi? And actually, if you're in Europe, it would be fungi, which is kind of related to the singular form, which is fungus. In America, we do say fungi, and I'm not going to go into maybe the reasons before that, but the fungi do represent about 144,000 different species, which includes the three primary groups of yeast, mold/mildews, and mushrooms. So the next time you're out enjoying a mushroom burger with a beer or a glass of wine, you are now enjoying the fruits of the fungi family. I think one thing to remember is that molds in particular play a key role in the decay and decomposition of dead materials, and then by recycling them back into the environment as nutrients. Molds are extremely diverse and exist as a variety of forms and structures. For the most part, molds are multicellular organisms that form filaments, which is how we see that appearance that they do give. They are able to adapt and survive in almost any environmental condition, and they can be found almost anywhere, which is one of the challenges for disinfection. They do prefer areas that are high in moisture and oxygen, but again, they can almost be found anywhere. They do reproduce by forming very resistant spores, and these spores then are released into the environment, either into the air or into the surfaces, and then can actually start the life cycle going again. Again, their resistance is a challenge for disinfection. As we get into mold, a lot of times the questions come up as to, what types of mold there are. We're going to address three of the common genera of mold that we find in environmental situations. Bill's already identified a key villain as being a member of the genus Aspergillus. They can grow in a number of carbon sources, but also they do flourish in environments where there's almost a complete lack of nutrients. The Aspergillus niger that Bill talked about earlier is a prime example. It grows on damp walls and is a major component of what we call mildew. Some of these Aspergillus species can cause illness and other health concern, so they do need to be addressed and removed from the environment. The next one we want to talk about is Stachybotrys. Stachybotrys targets materials rich in cellulose. So in those cases, think wood and other building materials. And they also form a black mold, one of the real common threats after floods that you see in some after post-hurricane type of situations. They are involved with poor indoor air quality, and like Aspergillus, they can have health impacts. So they do need to be dealt with and removed from the environment. And lastly, for this morning, we'll reference the genus Trichophyton. We know these because they cause tinea, which we affectionately know as either athlete's foot, ringworm, or the dreaded jock itch. Trichophytons, they spread easily from one part of the body to others, as well as from the body and out to the environment. So think socks and shoes and clothes. As facility managers, we think about spray, showers, floors, carpeting. These all can be sources of transfer of the trichophyton and then the ensuing infections. The spores that trichophyton produces can be very resistant as well, just like the other ones, and they are spread everywhere once they find a home in a location. Obviously, this is a concern for anybody in the athletic area that might be exposing their bodies to these common sources of infection. Bill, so that's a little bit about the who and why of molds and our reasons for concerns. What can we do then?
Well, thanks, John. To start off our conversation around best practices to control and prevent the mold, I'd like to start with the picture on the middle right-hand side of this slide where we talk about eliminating moisture sources. Over the years, I've fielded countless phone calls and people call up and say, how can we get rid of mold? And as I often do, I typically answer their question with a question. Have you fixed the leak? If we're not introducing moisture, mold is prevalent. It exists throughout nature, and that's actually a good thing for us. Otherwise, in a month or so, we'd be up to our ankles or our knees, really, in dead leaves. Mold helps those to decompose for us and things like that. So it is a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's when we have the introduction of moisture that we really have to be concerned, though. So we need to fix those leaks. We need to take care of leaky faucets, leaky shower heads, things like that. Pinhole pipe leaks in walls can create an inordinate amount of trouble for us. So we want to eliminate those moisture sources. Working sort of counterclockwise around our slide here, we want to prevent condensation by using insulation around doors, walls, things like that, so that we can control the exchange of temperature. We also want to reduce the indoor humidity. We definitely need to have it below 60 degrees or 60% relative humidity, but the sweet spot is really between 30 and 50% relative humidity indoors. When we do have a leak or a flood, we need to clean and dry as quickly as possible. We want to remove those wet building materials. Our slide says 24 to 48 hours, but anyone who's ever attended one of our carpet care classes at the RCU knows that we want to get carpet dry in 24 hours or less, or we run a very high risk of having a mold bloom. And that's whether we're having a flood issue or we've just extracted our carpet. We need to get those dry as quickly as possible. So it's important to have some air movers on hand in case of an emergency, but also for your routine project maintenance. And then also we want to make sure that we're not trying to save and dry out and paint ceiling tiles. Ceiling tiles get wet from a roof leak, we need to just replace them. And then look to use appropriate materials. If we have an area that we know is constantly damp, maybe that's not the best place to put a carpet, okay? And then we want to disinfect those problem surfaces. And I'm going to turn it over to John for a moment to talk about that, although we will talk more about disinfection in just a moment.
Right, and I think that's a key thing with what Bill just said about the use of appropriate materials. Some surfaces defy being disinfected. I think we want to make sure we're aware of that. If there's wallboard or wood that's been infected, then you obviously have to take that into consideration when you're trying to disinfect it. Because porous surfaces, again, are difficult to actually enhance with regard to disinfection. And so the whole idea with the use of the disinfectants is to kill the actively growing mold and as much as possible to deactivate and kill the spores. I think the point here, obviously when you have a mold issue, it's a fairly pervasive thing through a specific environment or throughout an area. And so how do we treat all these surfaces? We have found this to be an effective use of a relatively new concept that we've been working on with our customers, and this idea of what we call no-touch disinfection. And there we use electrostatic sprayers to economically and effectively apply disinfectant to all the surfaces that are being treated in a specific area. And so I think that's a key thing to, again, to be able to get as general of an application as possible with that disinfectant to try to kill and deactivate as many of those spores as possible in that specific area. So Bill, that goes back to you.
Thanks, John. So you have an outbreak. Who are you going to call? Well, it really kind of depends on the situation. It depends on how your organization feels about dealing with mold. But I would encourage you, if nothing else, consult these EPA guidelines for mold remediation in schools and commercial buildings. We'll have that link on the follow-up email for you, but you can certainly find that on your own, I think, if you go to the EPA's website. But there is a wealth of information contained within that document. But I think you really need to categorize your outbreak. And we have some guidelines here on the slide for minor, medium, and large. Now, I guess it's kind of like surgery. A minor mold outbreak is somebody else's. Minor surgery is someone else's. Your surgery is never minor. But as you can see there, 10 square feet or less is considered a minor outbreak, and that's something you may feel comfortable with dealing with on your own. 10 to 100 square feet would be medium, and that may start to cause some consternation. And really anything over 100 square feet, I would encourage you, unless this is really your business, that maybe you want to consult an outside contractor. Now, one of the things that we did in preparation for this, I did a quick Google search of mold remediation companies in the greater Philadelphia area and came back with something like 248 of them. So I'm sure that's their claim. It's not necessarily saying that they are the best people to call, but it's a place to start. And I would encourage you, if you don't have a remediation contractor, when you are looking for one, ask them where they got their training. Did they receive any third-party certification for the training? Training is available from a lot of different avenues, but certainly OSHA, the EPA has a non-certification training available, and the IICRC has spent a lot of time on mold remediation over the years. So I would also encourage you, make sure you have a written emergency response plan for mold. If you don't, you may want to partner with a contractor. They may provide that information for free. But it would also be a good idea to have a contractor already with a pre-authorized contract. In case you have an outbreak, you don't want to start all that administrative paperwork before you can get the remediation underway. So if you are going to tackle this on your own, what should you wear? And the slide gives you some good guidance there with regard to respirators, gloves, and eye protection. But we may need to go a little bit further. You see the picture there with the coveralls, the gloves, all of that is highly recommended. And it's very important that if you have a breathing problem like asthma, you don't enter a building with mold damage. Likewise, if you have a weakened immune system from cancer treatments or other medicines, probably not a good idea to go in there. And we should always keep children out of buildings that have mold in them because of their young and underdeveloped immune systems. And what's the best method to remove mold? We've got, again, 4 items here. First one being to scrub the mold off of your hard surfaces and dry them completely. As John mentioned, porous surfaces may be candidates for discarding. But a good general purpose or all-purpose cleaner, even dish soap, is typically adequate for that. We see the discard of contaminated materials like the ceiling tiles I mentioned. Make sure we avoid exposing staff to this while we're dealing with it by using proper personal protective equipment and keeping other people out of the area. We don't need curiosity seekers. And then don't run your HVAC system if you have an outbreak situation, because you could very easily spread it throughout the rest of the facility.
So Bill touched on this, and we discussed this a little bit earlier with regards to the chemicals that are available to help us with this, deal with these situations. Bill reviewed the need to clean using basically any type of a general purpose cleaner. We have a saying in microbiology, you can't disinfect a dirty surface. And so I think that's a key thing when you look at the soil loads and dealing with these mold outbreaks or blooms, that we need to do as much cleaning as possible before we try to do anything next. One consideration when picking a product, there are some formulated products, general purpose cleaners that have odor counteractants as a part of that formulation. And one of the things with molds, we get that musty smell. These can go a long way in helping to alleviate the odors that may be associated. So that might be a consideration when looking at a cleaning product. The second option there, that really is the primary one recommended by the EPA for, especially for homes that are inundated by floods, is the use of bleach. We would always recommend to use a bleach product that basically has disinfectant registration, so that way you know you're getting the adequate level of the sodium hypochlorite, which is the active ingredient. With regards to that, we want to make sure that you're using the proper dilution. And with bleach, it's basically a 1 part bleach to 10 parts water, or a little more easy to remember is 1 cup of bleach per gallon gives you approximately that same type of dilution. Bleach is very effective at destaining those areas that might have been negatively impacted with the mold. So again, it does give you that, but then as a part of that, it also will destain clothing and carpeting and other types of surfaces. So we need to always be careful with its application. And then as recommended there, you can't really mix bleach with anything, is the safest way to do it. No cleaners, and especially anything with acid or ammonia, and you'd end up having a whole separate issue to deal with. So use cautiously. And the third thing we recommend there are cleaner disinfectants. There are disinfectants out there that have mold claims, and that would be the key thing. If you're going to use a disinfectant, read the label, make sure there are claims for any of the molds that we specifically talked about before. Aspergillus is a common one that you'll see claims for. You may see Stachybotrys. But if you're dealing with those athlete areas, the athletic areas, the wrestling mats, the showers, the gyms, those type of locker rooms, then you would definitely want to look for something that has a claim for the trichophytons. Also with these cleaner disinfectants, they can be used through those no-touch disinfection systems that we talked about, whereas bleach cannot be applied that way. So again, that's another advantage for using those cleaner disinfectants. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Bill.
Well, it looks like we've run a couple minutes beyond our 15 minutes that we planned to take this morning. So out of respect for your time, we will skip questions. We will, again, have that follow-up email for you here, hopefully shortly. We've also been recording this webinar, so if you have other folks within your organization that you think should hear it, we hope to have that up on our website, hopefully in the very near future. Again, we hope you found today's mini webinar, if you will, helpful. And if you still have some other questions, and maybe you haven't had the chance to get them in on the chat, please reach out to your Philip Rosenau sales leader. We are not mold remediation experts, but we are happy to walk down that path with you and help give you what guidance we can to make sure that you're doing the right thing for your facility, and more importantly, for the people that use your facility. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your hectic schedule to join us this morning. Like I said, hopefully you found the information helpful, and please keep an eye out for another RCU on the Go presentation in the near future. Have a good day.
Thank you.